Utra. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the Institute of Linguistics of the Russian Academy of Sciences. It's a real honor to be here with you. And what I'm going to do today is going to discuss a bit and to present the situation of Basque and the language planning and language policy to promote and develop the knowledge and use of Basque. I'm going to share my screen now. Yeah, I hope you can see it. Is that okay? Okay, good. So let's go into it. So it's language policy in the Basque Country and multilingual education. And what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to introduce briefly the Basque language, the Basque Country, to get an idea of what it is about. And then we'll go into language policy and language planning in general. And number three, section 3 will be on Basque in education in the Basque Autonomous Community. And then we'll discuss some achievements, but also some challenges that we have. So let's start with the Basque language and the Basque Country. This is the city of San Sebastian, where I am now. It is part of the European Union, and the idea of multilingualism as something positive that is not exactly everywhere, but the idea of multilingualism as an asset for Europe and a shared commitment. And multilingual people are a precious asset because they act as the glue between different cultures. And they can be, the European Union, the European Commission also highlights the idea that there can be social and economic advantages in being multilingual. So we can say, what I want to say with this is that as the Basque Country is in Spain and France, and both are part of the European Union, we can say that there is some type of support from the European Union towards multilingualism, including minority languages. But there is also clearly a hierarchy in Europe and in the European Union. I mean, because there are also in other parts, but I'm referring more to European Union. And of course, English we know is more important and is everywhere, right? But then we have the state languages, and here we can have French, German, Spanish, Dutch, Danish, Swedish. The minority, and here we have Basque, Frisian, Catalan, Welsh, and many others. And then we have the immigrant languages and sign languages also, as like a pyramid where the highest on the pyramid is English. And then the state languages, the minority, and then the immigrant and sign languages. So we can say that Basque is there as a minority, that of course English is also important with us, even if we don't use it in everyday life, and the state languages that are French and Spanish, depending on which part of the Basque Country. Okay, so if we look at the different types of minority, now only minority languages in the European Union, we can have this typology, and we have some unique minority, kin state, and special. Unique minorities are those that don't have, they are not the language of a state. So for example, Welsh, Frisian, and Galician are only spoken in one country, but it's not in only one part of one country. Welsh in the United Kingdom, Frisian in the Netherlands, or Galician in Spain. But then we have Catalan and Basque that are unique, but are spoken in more than one country. Catalan is spoken in Spain, Italy, just a little bit, and France, and Basque is spoken in Spain and France. But in both cases, we call them unique, and we call them unique because they are not the language of a state, of a whole state. While, for example, if we say German, Slovene, Ukrainian, or Russian, a minority language is also in the European Union, talking about the European Union. But for example, if we look at Russian, it is a minority language in Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia, but is the language of a big state that is Russia, of course. So it's a difference because it will have different possibilities for language planning, because you can have support, you can have materials, you can have more teachers, you can, I mean, if you have a state where there is a large number of speakers of these languages, and Basque is not in this situation. Well, German is also spoken in Belgium, Denmark, France, and Italy, or Slovene in Austria and Italy, and so on. And there are some special cases, like Luxembourgish is a very small language, but it's getting quite a big status because it's the language of Luxembourg. Or Irish is not big in terms of numbers, but it is it's considered like the first language of Ireland, even though most people speak English and not Irish. So, and Maltese is a very small language, but because it's part of European Union, it's an official language. And while, for example, Catalan and Basque and Galician are not official languages, but there is the right to address the European Union in one of these languages, and then a translation is provided, but it's not one of the official languages. And then, of course, Romani and Yiddish are also a kind of special status. But let's see this in a different, if we look at the size of the minority languages. We have tiny languages like Cornish or sort of Frisian, Catalan in Italy. Catalan in Italy is very small, but Catalan in Catalonia is huge with 7 million people. And Galician, 2 million, and Basque would be Basque will be like 800,000 speakers of Basque. So between Luxembourgish and Galician, it would be Basque. But there is a huge difference with, I mean, the languages. The Catalan is always the biggest language, minority language. And there is even in many forums, I mean, we talk about Basque as a minority language, but with Catalan, they have, and they can have, for example, some forums, and they call it a medium-sized languages of Europe, and they have some conferences for medium size. But of course, what happens there is that there are much smaller languages that are official, and Catalan is official in Catalonia, and Valenciano in Valencia, and in the Balearic Islands, but it's not official in Europe. While they have more Catalan speakers than speakers of many other official languages. So this is a bit the situation. But now let's focus more on Basque then. The Basque Country is in France and Spain. Of course, it belongs to two different states. And the population, I mean, this is tiny, compared to Russia. And the population is 3 million for the whole of the Basque Country. And now for the Basque Autonomous Community that I'm going to focus more on, and this is in Spain, I'm going to show you a map now, is over 2 million people. So it is the Atlantic, not it is the Atlantic coast, not the Mediterranean, and it is between France and Spain. Now, if we look at the map, we can see that there are 7 provinces. The 3 that are on the on here, Lapurdi, Nafarroa, and Suberoa, those are in France. And the other 4, the big one of Navarre, and the other 3, Vizcaya, Gipuzkoa, and Araba, are in Spain. When I'm going to refer more to later to the Basque Autonomous Community, because in Spain, they also belong to 2 autonomous communities. Navarre is on its own, and then Vizcaya, Gipuzkoa, and Araba are the Basque Autonomous Community. So this, I'm going to refer more to the Basque Autonomous Community, but now at first, I also want to refer a bit to the differences in language planning and the differences in the changes in the number of speakers. Just for you, in case you know, and the cities in the Basque Autonomous Community, we have Bilbao, San Sebastian, and Vitoria. In Navarre, Pamplona, and in the most known cities in the French part, Biarritz, Bayonne, Hendaye at the border, Saint-Jean-de-Luz, Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, Okay, so we have the first, what we know about Basque in written form. We have the Glossars Emilianenses, and these Glossars Emilianenses was a text, a codex written in Latin. What you see here on the left that we don't have to read is a text in Latin, but there were some notes on the side. These are the Glossars, and is from the end of the 10th, beginning of the 11th century. And what is interesting is that the text was in Latin, the glossars were mainly in Spanish, but some were in Basque. And these glossars, these notes, were just to make it more clear for the reader. And these are the first text in Basque, a few sentences in this codex. Okay, now about the language. The language is different from Spanish. It's a non-Indo-European language, and it does not belong as Spanish to the Romance family. Spanish and French belong to the Romance families, or to the Germanic as English or German or Dutch. So if we see some basic terms here, like father, mother, son, daughter, brother, and sister, you can see that they are quite different from Spanish and quite different from English as well. And what we see is that in Basque, for example, the term sister, it depends if you are a sister of a sister or a sister of a man or a sister of a woman. With anaya is also that with some dialects, but in standardized Basque is only one word, but in some dialects, they also make this difference. But the main point here is that, because that is going to be important for language planning, that the language is different. It is different in vocabulary. And now we see here also in syntax, we have inflections. Spanish has no inflections. French has no inflections. So we have all the inflections as you can have also in German and other languages. And you have like that at the end of the word house, depending on what you add, you will have that. And what is quite interesting also with Basque, and is one is very interesting in linguistics, and that's why Basque is quite well known, let's say, among linguists, and also, for example, in generative linguistics, because of the syntax, and because it is a language that has, let's say, syntax that is, let's call it a bit different, exotic, whatever, because it has several things, but at the same time, it's kind of accessible because you can discuss it with a Basque linguist. I mean, that you can have access somehow, even, and there can be translations, there can be, so it's accessible, being quite different from the syntax of others. But one thing that is, as we are in a linguistic forum, that is very interesting about Basque and is that it's an ergative language. So we have the difference between, if we say, echea and echeak. Echea can be the plural of echea, which is home or house, both. But it can also be the ergative when it is the subject of a transitive verb. It needs a K at the end. So my name is Jasone, but if I am the subject of a transitive verb, and I say Jasone buys a book, I have to say Jasonek. And if I say Jasone is walking along the street, I say Jasone. So I add a K when it is ergative. But this, and also the auxiliary verb is different if it is transitive or intransitive. So it's quite, this is quite different from Spanish or French, of course. Well, from French, it has some, with the auxiliaries, it has something in common with the passé composé, but it is quite different. So let's go a bit into the sociolinguistic part. So there are sociolinguistic surveys, and it is, there have been sociolinguistic surveys of the whole of the Basque Country in every 5 years since 1991. So this year they will be collecting data that we will have the results next year or so. So in 1991, this is, of course, is very interesting because then we can see the development of the language, but and it is, we can see the development all over the Basque Country. And what they look at, and it is only for population over the age of 16, Okay, so the questions are on proficiency, the transmission of the language in the family, the use of the language at work or studying, and the attitudes towards the language, the attitudes towards not towards the language, but towards the policy of promoting the language, which is also interesting. So it is possible, for example, to download this one is in English, 6 sociolinguistic survey. And it has been published it was quite late. I don't know, they took quite long with this one, not very long ago, but it's with the data from 2016. And it's also in English. We have, and what do we have in these surveys? If we compare 1991 to 2016, what we see is that in the Basque Autonomous Community, this is where Bilbao, San Sebastian, Vitoria are, the number of speakers, and we are talking about the age of 16 and older, has gone up from 24.1 to 33.9. In Navarre, it has gone up from 9.5 to 12.9. And in the French part, that in Basque we call it Iparraldea, in the French provinces, it has gone down from 33 to 29.5. So what is happening here is that there is a big difference between, I mean, if you compare the Basque Autonomous Community and the French part, it's almost, well, the increase is quite important for the number of speakers of the population over the age of 16, and is going down in the French part. Of course, this is the result of language policy. Language policy is different in France and in Spain, in the Spanish part, okay? So this is related, and it's very, very clear because it's the same survey and it's the difference. Okay, we can be in a way optimistic, mainly about the increase. Navarre has a weaker policy than the Basque Autonomous Community, and there are more speakers in the Basque Autonomous Community, more speakers of Basque. Navarre has a weaker policy. And we can see also that the increase is not as big in Navarre as in the Basque Autonomous Community. But in spite of this increase, Basque is considered a language by the UNESCO as one of the languages that is in a situation of vulnerable, it's called. I mean, they have a map with the different languages, and of course there are categories that are much worse, but it's still a language that is vulnerable. And this is related also not only to the number of speakers, because of course we have to consider, as I say, it's not a language that it's spoken in another state, but it is only spoken in the Basque Country. So it is a minority because everybody speaks either Spanish or French as well. And so it is a situation of that is considered still vulnerable. And this is also related to the language use, because of course, as everybody can communicate also in Spanish, or in Spanish, in the case of the Basque Autonomous Community, and in French, there is more like 63.3% of the population are using only Spanish in the Basque Autonomous, in the Spanish part of the Basque Country, while it is only about 20% who use Basque normally. So even if the number of speakers is higher, as they can communicate also in Spanish, and for some it's easier to communicate in Spanish, the use of the language is not that high. And you can somehow teach the language more than that people uses the language, right? That you teach the language. The teaching of the language is somehow you can do it at school, but the fact that it is used for all uses is not necessary, that you cannot have so much influence. So there are Basque speakers who use very little Basque. That's the situation, and that's one of the reasons why that's one of the situations, sorry, why it is a vulnerable language. But let's look a bit at what type of policy we have, what type of policy, language planning. There is a lot of this. I'm not going to go into I mean, the language policy, you know, that language policy can exist also if nothing is done, because that is also a part kind of policy. But language planning is with very specific measures, very specific plans about the language. And here, what we're going to do is to see what happened in the past. And in the past, what we had, because there was a dictatorship in Spain from 1939, that the Spanish Civil War finished, it was 36 to 39, and to 1975 when Franco died. And what we have with the Spanish, I mean, languages like Basque was, the Basque Country was not supporting Franco, and there were a lot of things against, there was a lot of exclusion of Basque from public spaces. And this was so strong that even, I mean, what you see here is from Guernica, that there was the, you may be familiar with the famous, when there was the attack of the Germans in Guernica, but it was also the famous painting by Picasso. This is the village of Guernica, 1949. This is also policy, even if it's not a specific planning. And it says, and since you are one of the owners of the tomb in a cemetery in which it appears inscribed with names in Basque, I request that you remove this plaque urgently and replace it with another in Spanish. So there was a lot of, we can say, repression against Basque at the time. So that is also important, because when this changed, and I'm going to give you information about that, somehow there was a lot of enthusiasm for Basque. And that is, of course, everything is also linked to the historical situation. What we can say is that even though Basque is accepted nowadays by most people, not by all. And I'm going to show you something from 2021 from a newspaper. And this person, who's just an opinion editor, says in Spanish, it's a Spanish newspaper, not in the Basque Country, but I hope all minority languages disappear and we all end up speaking in English or Spanish. The world would be a better, more peaceful, more cultured, and more civilized place if only one language existed. Well, a big contradiction, because he wants Spanish and English, and then he talks about one. I think that he wants Spanish only everywhere, but he has included English in the first sentence. But what we can see here is that there is still, I mean, going against minority languages, we can still find it. But after when the dictatorship was over, and there was a new Spanish constitution in 1978, things changed, and we have some Basque legal support for Basque, because of course, in order to have a language planning to promote and develop the use of Basque, you also need to have support, legal support for the language. So what we have is the Spanish Constitution from 1978, that it was the Spanish as the official language of the state. The other Spanish languages, it says, will also be official in their autonomous communities in accordance to the statutes. So, and then we have for the Basque autonomous community, 1 year later, we had the statute of autonomy, and then Basque and Spanish are official in the Basque autonomous community. This is not the case for Navarre, which is a separate community, and there is official only in part of Navarre and not in the whole of Navarre. So the situation is a bit complex. All this is in Spain. There is nothing like this kind of officiality that way in France. And after, so we have the Spanish Constitution, Statute of Autonomy of the Basque Autonomous Community. So it's co-official, Basque is co-official along with the Spanish in the Basque Autonomous Community. And then we have the Basque Language Law of 1982. Later, there have been lots of decrees and so on, right? But this is the basic law. And it gives the right for citizens to interact in Basque and Spanish with the administration, to receive education in both languages.
Что-то случилось? Даша, может быть, вы как-то контактируете снова? А то я помню, я на каком-то заседании минут 15 говорила. Показалось, что я была выключена.
Значит, это в 10:33 произошло. Соответственно, в 8:33 в стране басков.
We are, okay, we are back, right? Sorry about that. Okay, so we were saying about all the rights that we have because of the Basque language law in the Basque language law in 1982 under the umbrella of the Statute of Autonomy and the Spanish Constitution. So what we have is that there has been an enormous amount of, let's say, of investment in language planning. What I'm going to explain today is going to be just there has been a lot of language planning. I'm going to show you a bit and a bit more on education, but there is a lot in every field. And I want you to, I don't know, to see that we have a lot of language planning in any field in case there is an interest in going deeper with something. So with the language planning, what we have is at the corpus level, the status level, and acquisition level. Corpus means the language itself. And here I must say that there was already in the last years, the last decades from the 60s and 70s, even though we were in the dictatorship, there was it was more tolerance towards Basque. And the Academy of the Basque Language that was created in 1918 was working already on standard Basque. I mean, when you have a language that is not used much in the public space and in the media and so on, what you get is that, of course, the dialects are quite isolated from each other. There are more differences. So a standard Basque was created based on the central uses of the language in the central uses of the central dialect of Basque that was more in Gipuzkoa, in the area of Gipuzkoa, where it was most spoken. It was based on that, but including elements from other areas. This was developed already in the 70s. And this was, of course, problematic for some people, as you can imagine, but is nowadays used in the media and is used at schools and so on, even though, of course, there are some dialects mainly at the oral level, but it was standardized, we can say. But this came already from the 70s. There were controversies about it, but we can say that it's not a real issue nowadays. Then it was the status of the language. And of course, if it's necessary in the administration for some people who are going, because citizens have the right to use Basque, you will need civil servants who speak Basque, you will need teachers who speak Basque, and so on. And also for acquisition. And acquisition is not only at a school, but also very important for adults. The acquisition of adults also it can be people who do it because they want to speak more Basque to the children or whatever, but it is also for civil servants, teachers who will need, need to teach through Basque or to speak Basque or to use Basque with other people, and they already have a job, so it's not new people that are entering the system with Basque, but people who have to learn Basque. In many cases, of course, what you have with Basque is that it was in the family before, it was lost, and people were quite enthusiastic about learning, at least in the first years. Not perhaps later, the children went to school, they could learn Basque. So there are not, I don't think there are so many enthusiastic adults nowadays who want to learn Basque, because many have already learned Basque at a school. And there were a lot of schools for adults in the past that they wanted because it was possible and so on. Anyway, language planning, we have different areas of intervention, and there are family, education, leisure, sport, socioeconomic areas, area with private companies, culture, media, public administration with health and other areas. Okay, what we have, I'm just going to give you some examples because there are plans for everything. But for example, when we get with the COVID, when we have the vaccination, we get a certificate. And some countries in the European Union, some countries are asking for a certificate to get into a restaurant, a bar, or whatever. So we have a kind of common certificate, not exactly the same, but accepted in different places that, for example, I was recently in the Netherlands, and to enter a hotel or a restaurant, I needed to show my certificate that is like this one, and they would scan the QR code and they recognize it, okay, because it's a European Union certificate. Okay, what you have here, and the point now is that this certificate, apart from the QR, it says it's in 3 languages. It's EU Digital COVID Certificate, in English, Certificado COVID Digital de la UE, de la Unión Europea, or the European Union, and that's in Spanish, and then EBECO COVID Ziurtagiri Digitala, that's in Basque. So it's in 3 languages, and we get it. It's also the Basque flag, the Spanish flag, and the European flag, and the whole certificate is in the 3 languages. So I mean, Basque is also in health and is in this in different things. For example, there has been also a lot of Basque in, for example, in Google. I was trying this. I don't know how good the Russian will be, but for example, a direct translation from Basque into Russian with Google. And this is a little text from the Basque Academy of Science, and this is what I got. I mean, it has been with many. I don't know if it's good or if you can more or less, you know, Google more or less, I guess, but it's directly from Basque into Russian. So it has improved quite a lot. There were more problems in the past with this, but I mean, just to show that Basque has got to these places, right? I mean, from being a language that you couldn't even use in the cemetery, so to say, to have, I mean, that you can have direct translations and so on. So there is a lot of language planning and a lot of human and economic resources behind this to get here. I'm going to show you another example of how it works a bit with the socioeconomic sector. I mean, this is of course, let's say, education is much stronger than private companies with Basque, but this is the way it works in different sectors, because this is going to be also similar at university, for example, is to have a diagnosis of the situation, of how Basque is used, and there are specific instruments to have a diagnosis of the situations, like in companies, if it is used in all the information they give to clients, if it is used for workers to talk, how many workers speak Basque, how many can speak Basque, what about all the written the website or this or that. I mean, everything, there are tools for the diagnosis. And then after that, there is a plan. The plan is after discussions with experts, analysis of the diagnosis, and then there is a plan. And I'm going to show you a little bit what the idea is with the plan. Here we have two publications. They are in Basque, and I think some are in Spanish. They are not in English. One is the diagnosis, a detailed diagnosis of what it is in the economic sector, socioeconomic sector, the situation of Basque. And the other one is the plan for 2020 to 2023. So what they have basically is looking at the analysis and then the plan also, how to change, how to improve, how to have more Basque, linguistic landscape and digital environment, then language with customers, communicative competence, language with customers, which languages they use with customers, communicative competence, how competent workers in that company are in Basque, social activation like campaigns, information about citizens' linguistic rights and so on, and then language at work, which languages are used at work. But what they also say all the time is that they want agreements with this. I mean, there is no idea of going to a company and say, now you have to do everything in Basque. It's more negotiating with the company, negotiating with people, and giving possibilities and giving financial help or advice about how to work at different levels. For example, this is in Basque, but you don't have to, it's just to get you the idea. In one of these areas, like if we have a linguistic landscape and digital environment, you can see here that we had the first one there, in purple, or language with customers or communicative competence. Okay, in each of them, here we have this one, this is the language with customers, and this is communicative competence, and this is activation. So what we're going to have is that there are some objectives, El Burua is objective, and there are going to be specific general objectives in that specific area. Then we are going to have indicators, what are we going to look at exactly, and then we're going to have an objective, a specific target for 2023. Where are we going to be in 2023? I'm showing this because this is the way it works, let's say, at all levels. So first is a diagnosis that is usually what we, what is called, sometimes you must have seen this of the SWOT analysis, where you look at, you do a diagnosis of the situation, looking at, getting to, after analyzing different things, getting to which are the strengths in this sector, which are the weaknesses, which are the opportunities and the threats. And after that, discussing with experts, whatever, and trying to be realistic and to get to reach agreements. See this way, like which is the aim we want to, for example, we want to increase the we want a company to get committed to increase the visibility of Basque in what they do. And then there will be different things, and one could be to see how much funding they may need for this and discuss it, or to have meetings with them, or it can be to offer courses if it is for the language, or it can be any other thing to create a specific programming, always in collaboration. So, but this will happen also when we talk, for example, about increasing Basque at university. There will be a diagnosis, and then there will be some aims for the future, some aims, indicators, and specific targets for the future. So this is just to get an idea of that there are plans like this for town halls, there are plans for health system, for many things, okay? But this is more or less the idea that they basically work. What happens with people, with the staff, that we need Basque language learning and testing. So when we have, for example, new teachers going to schools, or new civil servants in the administration, they usually need, it depends on the job, but their jobs in the administration, for example, they are qualified as Basque speaking or different levels or non-Basque speaking. It depends on the job. And then they can be with, depending on the job, they can be with Basque speaking, they can be the different levels of the Council of Europe, the A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2, they can be those levels of the Council of Europe that are used, and it can be that for a specific job, you need a C1 level, for another job, you need a B2 level, or whatever you need in the administration. So that's the way it works. There are also activities, there are many other things, but there are activities involving the whole, trying to involve the whole population. And one of them is Aldia, which is like they call it a social experiment with people, trying to involve people to use Basque as much as Basque as possible for 11 days. This happened, for example, last year. Last year was difficult also with COVID and so on, but to involve people for 11 days using Basque. And there are different possibilities. I mean, the idea is to ensure the possibility of communicating in Basque at all times, because it's the idea people know the language, but they don't use it so much. And people in these spaces can participate in different ways. And there is the repressed, which is if you wear this, everything is voluntary, but if you wear this badge, you are, repressed means ready to hear. That would mean I cannot speak the language, but I can understand. So I'm happy that you speak Basque to me, but I may answer in Spanish. AOBC, the one on the right, then I'll go to the one in the middle. The one on the right is I'm ready to speak Basque, I can speak Basque. So perhaps you wear that those days, we wear this. And when you wear that, you have others know that you can speak Basque, okay? And then the other one, that is the Arigunea. This is when a group of people have a compromise to speak Basque, have a compromise to speak Basque, okay? And they say, we're going to speak Basque in this group. I'm going to move now into education. Education has been very important because that's where most people have learned Basque. In 1982, we had, there were 3 models of education developed: Spanish medium, Basque and Spanish, and Basque medium. So parents could choose one of these 3. There is always English as well. And what we have is that nowadays, most parents choose a Basque medium. Why? Well, because they wanted more Basque medium, even if they speak Spanish. And also because it can be more useful in society, because it can be easier in certain jobs. I mean, if you have 78% of the students nowadays who are using Basque medium, most teachers need to speak Basque. For example, if you want to be a teacher in the Basque Country, you need Basque. So these are from last year, some figures from last year. And you see that in primary, 76% Basque medium, D model, and B, Basque and Spanish, and very few are Spanish. And in secondary, similar, a little bit lower. What we have had then is that Basque, this is the green one here, is going up. Spanish has been going down from the 80s to now. And the B model is more or less similar. But even if we have this success, and of course, this explains the number that we saw before, the number of the speakers, what we have is quite a few problems with the use of Basque, because these children who speak Spanish at home, go to Basque medium school, they still speak Spanish among themselves, and many times for the teacher. Here we see that in primary school, students speak to the teacher in Basque, when they are in the D model Basque medium, to the teacher in Basque, and but in secondary is 80%, it has gone down a bit, but in primary school with the classmates, they only a bit over half speak Basque to other classmates, and in secondary, even less, 30%. And this is in the Basque medium system, okay? We have also English at school, because in most cases it starts, children start learning English from the age of 3 or 4, and some English also, some schools have English as an additional language of instruction. And we have immigrant students, and we have only like 3% in 2003, 2004, but we have like 16% of the students nowadays are the most recent, I couldn't find more recent figures, are immigrant. About 50% of them are, already speak Spanish because they come from Latin America, but we have immigrants also from Ukraine, Romania, Morocco. A little bit about Basque at university. Well, this is also, I mean, if you go to University of the Basque Country, you find that you can have the information in Basque, Spanish, and English. As you can see, here is the Basque, I mean, all the information. In fact, it is all in Basque and Spanish, and in English, you have more information for foreigners. That is not everything that we can see in Basque and Spanish. Here also, this is at University of the Basque Country, the public university that is in the Basque autonomous community. In all the provinces is the same university. There are some private universities that have some Basque, but not so much of a plan for Basque, as strong as the University of the Basque Country. So students have the right, of course, and official documents are in both languages. There are special plans, and English and French can be additional language of instructions, mainly English. What we have, again, is to see that is similar, is a plan for 2018 to 2022 in this case, and it is on these things: the visibility and use of Basque, the teaching of Basque, to teach more Basque at university, the corpus, because here, of course, you are into technical language. If you want to teach chemistry or engineering in Basque, you need the language for that in Basque. So in the corpus here is still challenging sometimes. And research, I mean, you can have a doctoral thesis in Basque, and staff, I mean, staff and that they have to be Basque speakers, or that some of the supporting staff has to speak Basque. Just giving you some figures, the teaching staff at this moment, 58% is Basque speaking, and there are exams and so on for the levels of the Council of Europe. Credits offered in Basque is 82% at the bachelor level, but only 11% at the master level, because there is a lot more English at the master level, and also Spanish. And well, everything is offered also in Spanish. When I say 82% is offered in Basque, this means that it is 100% is also offered in Spanish, almost 100%. So students can choose a subject in Basque or in Spanish. And students in the first year, about 51% choose the Basque language stream. They may have here and there some subjects in Spanish, because mainly technical subjects. PhD in Basque is about very few, like 8 or 9 PhD, any area per year in Basque. There are hundreds in Spanish and English. It's a big university. Scientific articles in Basque, 118. There is also a problem because these scientific articles sometimes, because they are in Basque, they are not valued as when they are in important scientific journals in English, of course. And supporting staff, about 73% speaks what is required, we can say. We have a lot of books. Some are translated, like the ones on the first row here. There are translations from books in Spanish or English into Basque, and some are produced, written by and published by the University of the Basque Country. But you know, they can be on economics, or they can be on physiology, or they can be on different areas. There is a lot of investment on this. And the director of our university, Eva Ferreira, the way that, for example, at the opening of the academic year, which is a very important event, she alternates Basque and Spanish. This is commonly done, but not repeating, to make Basque necessary as well. So if you don't speak Basque, you are missing everything that is in yellow. And if you speak both languages, you get the whole, you'll get the whole text, the whole speech. So this is another technique. So we're going to go to the just very little about the achievements and challenges. To have a bit of time for questions. One is that at the level of status, we have some achievements. I mean, the highest academic levels, where it is all over in different areas, and Spanish sa1, the speakers are learning Basque. So it's an achievement. The corpus is still, I mean, it's used everywhere. There is the language, has been developed to be used at the schools, universities, court, hospitals, administration. Still, in some areas, there is a lot of support at university for technical areas sometimes. And the acquisition, we know that adult and adult education, it has gone very well. But there are, well, sorry, before, if we think about the past, we didn't have legal recognition, we didn't have funding. Teachers' proficiency was very low at the time, and not many teachers could speak the language, but they were not literate in Basque. I mean, they had studied Spanish to become teachers. They were fluent orally, but they had to take courses to be able to acquire literacy skills in Basque, because they had literacy skills, but only in Spanish. Teaching materials that, as I said, at universities is still a bit challenging. And then standard Basque and Batua is more or less, I mean, we can say that these were in the past, and these have been more or less solved. We can say more or less solved. There is always something, but more or less solved. But we have some challenges now, which is the use of Basque. That is a real challenge. From bilingualism to multilingualism, of course, we need English. We have English, and you have too many subjects sometimes in the curriculum. We are working in education at integrating languaging, at what we call pedagogical translanguaging. And we also have the immigrant population, that what is happening is that, of course, I mean, it's happening to us mainly with sometimes with immigrants more from Latin America. They come to Spain, they have emigrated to Spain, and all of a sudden they realize that there is here another language they didn't expect. They thought they knew the language, and that is problematic for them somehow. And it is difficult to have the same enthusiasm to learn a minority language that is not spoken outside the Basque Country, and to learn this language when it's not a language that has been in your family or whatever that your grandparents spoke, and to learn that language, to be motivated for that. And of course, globalization. I mean, you can see that there is a huge development with Basque, but in different things, but it is so difficult to catch up. I mean, if you think about, I don't know, production, I mean, there is Basque television and so on, but production of series or they are digital apps for the phone, but to keep up with that, I mean, to the resources when you have a very small population, right? So it is problematic, but still, I will say one of our writers, I think is the most international, he says, he was asked by an American journalist, and why do you speak Basque if you can speak Spanish? And he said, a very simple reason. We want our language to last, not because it's pretty or because it's Asian, but for one simple reason, because it's a language we know well and which is useful to us in our daily lives. So I'm going to, these are some books on minority languages and education, and also multilingual education. This is a book that will be able to download by the end of December for free, open access, and it's on pedagogical translanguaging. But because translanguaging is so important nowadays, we're also talking about the sustainability of minority languages when we talk about translanguaging, because we need spaces for minority languages also. Not everything can be translanguaging, and we're talking also about this in this book. And these are two specific books about Basque. And so, thank you.
Thank you very much for your very clear, entertaining, enlightening presentation So now we have some minutes for questions. So please go ahead. Nina Starova, please.
Right. Thank you very much for this wonderful talk. My question is regarding the opportunities the students from the Basque Country have in terms of the education, in terms of studying at universities in the rest of the country, right? Not in the Basque Country. If, for example, the students have chosen at school that D model where the instruction is in Basque, right? So we can assume, right, that there's Spanish, well, maybe they become the Basque dominant, or at least they also know the terminology in those subjects, first of all in Basque and not Spanish, right? But then they want to be enrolled at university, which is not in the Basque Country, but in the rest of Spain. Do they have struggles with that or not? Like, what is then the obstacles or issues? Because I guess they can be underprivileged comparing to other students, like from Spain, who are Spanish monolingual, Spanish dominant, and they know the subjects in Spanish, right? So maybe it is somehow regulated by the exam they all have to sit. Like, what is the situation in this case?
Okay, regarding the university entrance exam, students can take that exam in Basque or Spanish. I mean, for all the subjects. Well, students always study Spanish as a subject in every year. It's compulsory to study Spanish, and they're studying literacy skills. But of course, they can study in primary and secondary, and they study the subjects for the university entrance exams. They can take it either in Basque or Spanish, whatever they prefer.
Well, it's in Basque Country and in the rest of the country, like in Madrid,
country.
Barcelona.
No,
but if they want to study in Madrid, for example.
Yeah. They take the exam, for example, let's imagine that they decide to take the exam of university entrance in Basque. These are official exams that are accepted everywhere. So the grade they got in the Spanish, in the Basque, in the university entrance is not an exam for each university. It's a general exam for Spain, you see? I mean, so you get a general exam for Spain that you can take in Spanish, you can take in Basque, and you get a grade. For example, you want to study medicine in Madrid. If you get a grade, that grade will be, if it is high enough for a university or whatever in Madrid or whatever, you are in the same situation as other students. What happens? So that is not a problem for the student to take the exam because the exams are not specific exams for one university. They take the exam in Basque or in Spanish, whatever they prefer, whatever they think they're going to do better, and then they get a grade. And that grade, the University of Complutense of Madrid for medicine will establish that they have so many of the people who have applied, the first 200 get a place or not. So that is not a problem. Regarding the other problem that could be related to that, Nina, is can they manage? Can they manage in Spanish when they study medicine? It's not usually a big problem because in technical, I mean, even if Basque is completely different and they are fluent in Spanish and they have had every year Spanish literacy. I mean, Spanish, when they learn Spanish in primary and secondary school, they are not learning Spanish as a foreign language because everybody is fluent in Spanish. So they are learning using the same textbooks of Spanish that you could use outside the Basque Country. Is Spanish also as a native language, not Spanish as a second language so much, or a foreign language. And there are a lot of cognates at the technical level. They don't usually. There are many students going to other universities. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nikita Cenoz, you are the next one.
Thank you. That was a very interesting talk, and I have two questions, one short question and another one. So the short question is, there were some figures on the number of speakers of Basque in the Basque Autonomous country, in France and some other area. And I've been wondering whether those figures take into account the migration. So my question is, do people migrate from France, the Basque speakers, to Basque Autonomous area?
Pardon, if people migrate, Nikita,
From
can you
France?
say?
From France?
From France. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to Basque Autonomous country.
Okay, there is contact with the French part of the Basque Country, but there is no much migration from European countries, from France, or there are things in common with the French Basque Country, and there are Basque medium schools in the French Basque Country, but there are not so much immigration. The immigration we get is more from Latin America and some countries like Romania, Morocco, Ukraine also. We get immigrants from there, not from France.
Okay, and my second question was, you have outlined some very interesting plans for Basque, and were there some other plans before which were successfully implemented?
Yeah, the plans, I mean, there has been basically the same type of policy from 1982 onwards. It has been the same type of policy, but of course with there are always new things added and so on. But basically in all this time, it has been the same policy all the time. Not that there have been, it has been quite successful at schools. It has been successful in other areas, less successful in some other areas. In the private sector is less successful. We can say that in the public sector.
Thank you. Artem Fedorinchik, please.
Yeah, thank you for your talk. Really, the example of Basques is very inspiring and fascinating. My question is unfortunately not so linguistic, but maybe a more political question. Here we often hear that in Catalonia, a linguistic question is a basis for separatism. And in the country of Basques, the situation is inverse. Because of realization of linguistic rights, the level of separatistic demand has decreased. We hear about Basque terroristic organization and so on and so on. So can you compare these two regions in such political context?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. There is, well, one thing also linguistic, even if the question is political, is Catalan is very close to Spanish. Basque is not. That's also important to know. And in Catalonia, there is only the model at the school that in the Basque Country, parents can choose to go to the A, B, or D model. So they can choose to go to Spanish speaking or bilingual and so on. What happens, I mean, in Catalonia, there is more reaction at this moment against Catalan. But of course, this is also related to, there is only Catalan medium education, even though in fact, there is a lot of Spanish medium hidden, we can say also. But there is this, so there has been a strong reaction against Catalan on part of the population, not necessarily the majority, but part of the population, because of all the independence and so on. In the Basque Country, we had the ETA for many years. Now I think it's 10 years that they stopped. It's 10 years. But there has been also, I mean, it has not been necessarily in all cases related to independence. So the majority of the population support the policy for, that is very important. That's why in the surveys, they also ask about the support for the policy. Some are against also, and some people are against. But in terms of independence, yeah, I think it's not as high as it was before, but we have, it's a bit less. But there are people supporting independence very clearly, and it is, but there are others that more or less, I mean, autonomy, yes, but not all the way to independence. And there is more that. And it is at this moment, I think it's more radical and it's more problematic for the language in a way. But of course, there is a huge difference. I mean, I have been at a meeting with experts from the Education Board of Catalonia, and I was the only one speaking Spanish. I gave a lecture, and all the discussion, they all spoke Catalan, and I have never lived in Catalonia. And I could follow. I got very tired after the discussion, but I could follow. I could follow all the questions without translation or anything, asking me questions in Catalan, and then I answered in Spanish. So there is a big difference there with the language. But regarding independence, I think that people are a bit afraid of the situation that Catalonia has got quite complex, the situation there with independence, and it's not as strong in that sense, but there is always the autonomy is very important. So according to the statute that I mentioned, in the Statute of Autonomy of 1979, there are still part of things that should be of some issues that with Spain. There is another big difference between Catalonia and the Basque Country, and it is that the taxes in the Basque Autonomous Community and Navarre, we manage, let's say, our own taxes. So, and we pay Spain so much money per year for certain things, the army, the monarchy, or whatever. But the money stays here, and there is an agreement of how much to pay. And in Catalonia, it's not. The money is in Madrid. That is also, you know, that economy is everywhere. That's also a big difference. And Catalonia, and this comes from the Statute of Autonomy of the 80s. And Catalonia at that time didn't negotiate that way. And Navarre had it because he had it even during Franco's time, because they supported, Navarre supported Franco, part of the people. And they were given that, and the Basque Autonomous Community recovered it from before. So there is the issue also. There are differences there. But I think that there is always, I mean, in politics, like now, Sanchez, the prime minister, needs to approve the budget, right? So he needs the votes from the Basque Nationalist Party, which is more moderate, not also linked to industry and things, you know, that is not so much into more moderate, they need it. So in exchange, they will get something else that comes here, some of the things of the statute that something else that then can be managed from the Basque Autonomous Community. So it's quite complex, it's fascinating, and it's quite different in that sense, yeah. I remember in some years ago, before all this Catalonia, that going to conferences, and we always, I mean, not all of us, but I mean, many of us are quite hesitant when you're Spanish. A bit ambiguous, you know, a bit like that. And the Catalans had no problem. My colleagues from Catalonia, we're Spanish, we're in Spain, and we somehow always avoid that a bit, or you know, and if you have to say you're Spanish, but you're a bit more, yeah, you try to not to say it clearly or something, and the Catalans always did it. And now it's the opposite. Well, now it's more like you know, it depends on who there is, but it has created quite a conflict in society with the division in Catalonia. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. Technically, we are already at the break time. And we will start our next session at 10:30. But since we have an opportunity to welcome Professor Cenoz here, maybe we can still take at least Andrei Kibrik's question, and Kayleigh has disappeared already, but we can try. But if you don't mind, I'll stop everyone exactly at the time of starting the next session. Okay, please, Andrei.
Okay, thanks very much, Professor Cenoz, for accepting our invitation and participating and giving a very, very informative talk. And my question is, when all these policies and measures are applied, is difference made between those people who are personally associated with Basque
Yeah, I mean, there is the measures, let's see, what you do, for example, when you need, let's say, at university, if you have the jobs for supporting staff, and that is the same for civil servants or whatever, a job is defined depending on the functions as having more Basque or less Basque that is needed. I mean, it can be a C1, we follow the Council of Europe, or it can be a B2, or it can be a C2, depending on what the person has to do with Basque. And then you need those requirements. If it is a vacancy, you will get somebody who has the requirement of the job, whatever. It doesn't matter where the person is from, or it can be an immigrant who has learned Basque. I mean, I have a colleague, for example, who's from the Netherlands, and she decided to stay in the Basque Country, Karen van der Werp, and she got the exams. She passed the exams of Basque, and she's teaching through Basque at university. I mean, it's the same for everybody, but it's the same for everybody, and there are support programs to teach Basque to immigrants also at school, for example, to immigrant children at school. It's the same for everybody because it depends on if the job has the requirement of Basque or not. And there are some immigrants who have learned Basque also.
Mm-hmm. And is there argument on the part of some immigrants or just Spanish people living there that why would we learn Basque where?
Of course. I mean, of course, there is always controversy. I mean, even if all this has been possible and there is a strong language policy to protect Basque, is because the parties is all linked to politics, as we said before. Also, I mean, because they have the majority of the parliament, or they have the votes of the people, but there are others who are against, and others who say it's not enough. I mean, you have everything. You have parties that say this is not. I mean, what we have now in government in the Basque Autonomous Community has been, with exception of 4 years, of the Spanish Socialist Party that was in government for 4 years, some years ago. It has always been let's say, the moderate nationalist party, Basque party, but in coalition with somebody, like now it's with the Spanish Socialists in coalition. And but there are, so the policies are from both. But there are, of course, others that think this is not enough, it should be a lot more, and others that think this is too much. Yeah, there are, of course, you can find both sides.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Kelly, I hope you have a very short question.
I'll try to keep it short. Eskerrik asko aurkezteniagatik. Thank you for the presentation. So as we can see, the revitalization strategies of the Basque Country have been overwhelmingly successful in normalizing Basque in education and increasing competency. But according to the Basque statistics that you showed in the presentation, over 70% of the youth ages 16 to 24 are capable of using Basque. But currently in the Basque Street Survey, so the Kale Neuroketa, only 13% are using it in informal interactions. You furthered this in your presentation as well, saying that in the school, in between students themselves, commonly it's in Spanish. So where do you see this going, and how do we use, for example, the Oregunia, so the breathing spaces for the language, how do we utilize these, and what kind of areas or spaces can be utilized to increase this usage or encourage it?
Thank you very much. And I can see that you know a lot about the Basque Country. That's really great. Yeah, and you mentioned, I mean, one of the big worries, as you say, is the use of Basque. It's a big worry. And there is also this study of Kale Neuroketa that is a very important study, observing people on the streets and which language they use, just observing people without interviewing people. And it is worrying. There are different, I mean, this is, as you say, the breathing spaces for for Basque are extremely important. What we are working on, for example, at the school, is that even if we use resources from different languages when teaching, and we take into account a multilingual perspective, we need breathing spaces where Basque only is used. And that is completely necessary at a school, but also in municipalities and so on. But that's one of the biggest challenges that there is. Not everything is okay, it's great, we have got this and that. We also have very important challenges, and we don't know. The future of the Basque language is not, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen. We have to keep working on that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And we wish, of course, good luck to the Basque Country for this development. So if you have time, please stay with us, because we have now an English also a session in English. I'm giving the floor to Dasha, who will be chairing the next session. And we have a break for 5 minutes left for those who would like to have a break. Yes, thank you, everyone.